This is Richard Lang. You're listening to The Bunker Briefing. This video stream is coming to you from an underground facility at an undisclosed location somewhere in Virginia. Fair disclosure, most of the guys on the Bunker Briefing team are former law enforcement people, either retired police officers, people that serve in federal and state law enforcement, or work for Homeland Security. Episode 8, The Deep State. Deep state is essentially the influence of career civil servants over the elected officials. It's not only the intelligence agencies, but the career bureaucrats of government whose officials sit in powerful positions. They don't leave when the presidents do. They see presidents come and go. They influence policy, and they can actually operate in opposition to the agenda of the elected officials by obstructing, resisting, and subverting their policies and directives, thus constituting a hidden government within a legitimately elected government. A deep state consists of networks of power operating independent of the nation's elected political leadership in pursuit of their own agenda and goals. The deep state operates through many front organizations and associations with multinational corporations in a variety of industries to orchestrate political and financial events, as well as exerting control on both national and international levels. All of these overlapping, interconnected industries wield immense power, and they tend to form alliances. They are also often at odds with each other. Now let's take a look at some of these powerful industries and how they interact with each other in controlling government. Up first, and probably most powerful, is the media. We're looking at the mainstream media, social media, Hollywood, and essentially they control all the news, they produce all the movies, and they're responsible for most of the social engineering that we're seeing taking place in the United States right now. As we discussed in episode 2, the entire media, all the newspapers, all the publishers, all the radio stations, and television broadcasting companies are now owned by 4 corporations. They're controlled by 4 corporations. Next up, we're looking at food and drugs. The agriculture companies like Monsanto and the genetic engineering of food and seed. The pharmaceutical industry, probably one of the most powerful lobbies in Washington, basically controls all drug and medication prices, which is why that Americans pay 10 times more for drugs and medication than they do anywhere else in the free world. So between these groups, they basically control all the food supplies and all the medical research. Not to mention new laws that will be passed to force Americans to take mandatory vaccines. The power of the military-industrial complex dates back into the late 40s and 50s. When Eisenhower left office, he warned us to beware of the military-industrial complex, because back then they were doing a lot of secret research and developing technology that was not being shared with the President of the United States or Congress. Things haven't gotten any better since Eisenhower left office. Basically, these defense contractors have a global presence, and funding that they get is done through a lot of what are called black projects or unaccountable projects, where Congress and the President don't really have any say-so over how that money's spent or what it's used for. They're also very connected to the intelligence agencies. The U.S. military is often used as a police force around the world to clobber leaders in countries that get out of line with what the deep state agenda is. We've lived in an economy for over 50 years that's predominated by the petroleum industry. Since the Nixon administration, all global trade has been done in what they call petrodollars, which means that the trade is done in using U.S. currency or U.S. dollars. The petroleum industry, essentially, they've been responsible for global price fixing for 50 years. Only more recently, as the United States has developed alternative sources of oil, now the United States is the largest producer of oil in the world. We're not under the pressure that used to be put on us by the OPEC nations, where we were paying $4 and $5 for a gallon of gasoline. Petroleum industry also, they control the world's energy supply. And by that I mean that they have been able to suppress a lot of alternative energy sources, including zero-point energy, which we'll talk about on another podcast. Another very powerful industry is the central banking system. When we say central banking system, basically we're talking about the U.S. Federal Reserve, the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, the World Bank, and the Bank of London, which is owned and operated by the Rothschilds family. We're going to talk more about these banking cartels in London in the next podcast, but essentially they control the world's money supply. They control interest rates, which ultimately affects market conditions and business opportunities. And make no mistake, These banks make money on wars. Another thing that a lot of people don't really understand is the U.S. Federal Reserve System is not a U.S. government institution. It's a private banking cartel controlled out of London. Again, we'll talk more about that next week. Last but not least is technology. There are really some disturbing innovations that are coming out of Silicon Valley in the development of artificial intelligence. Programs that use digital tracking on people or human personality profiling. If you remember the last time you went and got your driver's license renewed, when they took your photograph, they were very stern about making you take your glasses off and not smiling. The reason for that is they're building a biometric face recognition file so that everyone eventually that has a driver's license will be in the database. The biometric technology can pick you out of a crowd. I'm talking about people walking through a corridor in an airport, shoulder to shoulder, 10 people apart. The system can pick you out of a crowd immediately. And remember, every email, phone call, text, and web visit is recorded. And when you're using your Twitter account or your Facebook account, behind the scenes, the artificial intelligence is building a profile about you. And ultimately, that information can be used to control you more than you think, and may ultimately be able to control what you think. Again, part of the social engineering. When looking at these different industries and connecting the dots, one realizes that there's a very complex, interconnected web of alliances between these industries. Next, let's talk about some very powerful organizations. There's 3 powerful organizations that seem to have a lot to do with controlling things behind the scenes in the United States government. First of all, the Bilderberg Group. Basically, the name comes from the Bilderberg Hotel, where the first meeting occurred. The Bilderberg meeting is an annual conference supporting free market Western capitalism and its interests around the globe. Participants include political leaders, experts from industry, finance, academia, and the media. The Bilderberger Group has been criticized for its lack of transparency and accountability. Their meetings are all done in secret, and there's very heavy security around them. The other one is the Trilateral Commission. The Trilateral Commission is a non-government, non-partisan discussion group founded by David Rockefeller. Its members come from politics, business, academia. It's essentially the liberal wing of the intellectual elite. They've been known for what's called more moderation in democracy. And the way that they explain it is basically to turn people back to being passive and obedient so they don't put so many restrictions on state powers. And of course, one of the most famous members was Jeffrey Epstein. The third organization, which is very powerful, is called the Council on Foreign Relations. The Council on Foreign Relations is a United States nonprofit think tank specializing in U.S. foreign policy and international affairs. It's headquartered in New York with an additional office in Washington, D.C. The founders were David Rockefeller, Herbert Hoover, and Allen Dulles. Their members are too many to name them all, but U.S. presidents, senior politicians, more than a dozen secretaries of state, CIA directors, bankers, lawyers, professors, media figures, journalists, actors, and of course, Jeffrey Epstein. David Rockefeller, who is a globalist, has been one of the moving forces behind the Bilderberg Group, as well as creating the Trilateral Commission. He's also a director of the powerful Council on Foreign Relations, a group that many feel is the secret and illegal government behind the government. Virtually every important politician in our government, as well as CEOs of giant corporations, banks, and the media are all members of the Council on Foreign Relations, which is why there's a news blackout in mainstream media on any coverage of their meetings. Almost all presidential candidates over the years have been Council on Foreign Relations members, and some of them have gone to Bilderberg meetings. In 1991, Bill Clinton attended his first Bilderberg meeting and promised Rockefeller that he would support the NAFTA treaty if he was elected. It was later reported that Rockefeller shook Clinton's hand and said, "Thank you, Mr. President." Clinton was elected as President of the United States the following year. This transcript from the 1991 Bilderberg Group meeting in Bremen, Germany was released, proving how Rockefeller's views truly were. As indicated, Bill Clinton also attended this meeting along with many other members of the elite class. Rockefeller stated, quote, "We are grateful to the Washington Post, the New York Times, Time Magazine, and other publications, whose directors have attended our meetings and respected their promise of discretion for almost 40 years. It would have been impossible for us to develop our plan for the world if we had been subject to the bright lights of publicity during these years. The world is now prepared to march towards a world government. The supranational sovereignty of an intellect elite and world bankers is surely preferable to the national auto-determination practices used in the past. By auto-determination, he means where people elect their leaders. In 1994, Rockefeller was quoted at a UN dinner as saying, quote, "We were on the verge of a global transition. All we need is the right major crisis, and the nations will accept the new world order." The New World Order is a secretive power elite with a globalist agenda that is conspiring to eventually rule the world through an authoritarian world government. It's a cabal that operates through many front organizations and multinational corporations that we've already discussed to orchestrate political and financial events ranging from causing crises like the COVID-19 as well as exerting control on both national and international levels. Every president after Reagan have served the deep state. The deep state and its cabal grew stronger with each president as they gained control over everything behind the scenes. If you don't think so, go and listen to George Bush Sr. in his famous speech about the New World Order. As a final note, the current U.S. president is not a member of this club of elites and does not take orders from them. They've turned all their resources against him for obvious reasons. At a recent rally, Trump stated, "They're not after me, they're after you, and I am just in the way." As a final note, the Bunker Briefing is produced by Lang Online Media. Lang Online Media is not sponsored in any way. We're not paid by any individual corporation or political action group. All members of our team, including myself, serve without compensation, with only the interest in socially conscious issues. This is Richard Lang. Thanks for listening. This podcast was produced by Lang Online Media. You can reach us on the web at langonline.media. Please like our video and don't forget to hit the subscribe button. And as always, be careful out there.